Brooklyn Park and the northern part of Brooklyn Park and all of Champlin. And I come to the Senate via the school board. I was spent 8 years on the Anoka-Hennepin School Board, the last 3 as its vice chair, and learned lots of valuable things about our local communities regarding education and what's happening going forward. Prior to that, I served under the U.S. Secretary of Education, Rodney Page, who was appointed by George Bush to be the Secretary of Education. I served on his Federal Interagency Coordinating Council in that 3-year term. So I went backwards on that. But I just wanted to tell you my whole life has been about health and human services. I serve on health, human services, and housing policy, education, E12, finance and policy, as well as the Vice Chair of Energy and Environment. We could go on more than 3 minutes worth about what is important to me and why the personal experiences that I've had with family. Just now, my mother-in-law is in a nursing home, and that nursing home cost $9,500 a month comes out of pocket, and we'll address some of those long-term issues that are sitting in front of us regarding rate reimbursement, methodology, rate methodology, Medicare, Medicaid, private pay, public pay, etc. But it's seeing firsthand what nursing homes provide for our elderly that is important to us. We know the silver tsunami is with us. First time in history, our K-12 education of 850,000 students is less than those that are in retirement. So when people talk about the silver tsunami coming, no, you know what? It's already here. And we need to start thinking long range about what that means. And some of the issues addressed here will describe that as well. But one of the most important things that I've learned is when I was elected, I actually went out to St. Mary's Nursing Home and had a conversation about rates and about employment and about the fact that they were not seeing an equal distribution of money to be able to pay their staff just because they were a quarter of a mile from Hennepin County, a quarter of a mile from Wright County, and a quarter of a mile from Carver County. That's how it laid out. And McLeod County was less of a rate, so people were getting a job there and then moving to Howard Lake to be able to get even more payment. The same issue occurred up here as well. And that's why, as one of the co-authors of the 5% campaign, looking at for the first time in history, making those payments to people so that we could start to pay our PCAs and our nursing assistants and our CNAs the actual inflationary costs. I'll go a little bit more deeper into that later as well. But the thing there is that opened up a whole conversation, and what I wanted to talk about is the last 4 years we've seen some really good movement in finally starting to get reimbursement to our nursing care facilities. Thank you.
I just want to confirm, is this the introduction or question one?
Introduction.
Okay.
I'll be reading the question and then
we'll go. Okay. Introduce myself. I'm Jeff Lundy, candidate for State Senate, currently the mayor of Brooklyn Park. So those of you who have been going over to the Coon Rapids Dam, we're on the other side of that. Running this race because I'm mostly focused on getting things done. And so I look at things that we've seen at the legislature, and I wonder how can we move beyond the partisanship, move beyond the fighting, and start to work together. I think that people deserve that. As mayor of Brooklyn Park, I've been involved with, we're the most diverse large city in the state. People who have lived there in the past have moved out. I mean, I realized that it's actually a majority city, about 52% non-white. And so it gives me a good perspective on how to pull people together, because I think that I look beyond how people react when they see each other, how they try to treat people and they label people, and think about how that we can unite people so that when we have common ground, we get that done at least. And then we can fight over the stuff we don't agree with. A little background on myself, I come from a very large, as we're saying, Norwegian family. My grandparents had 12 brothers and sisters each, very much a farming community. They are passing into the twilight. There's only 2 left. And then my dad's generation are now starting to face those choices of where do they go, how do they live, do they move down south, are they staying here, how do they keep care for themselves. My father-in-law is most likely going to be moving in with us because he is a widower due to his wife passing of cancer. And so we are looking at how can we help him as best we can, and that probably will mean that he'll be living with us for a few years as he starts to kind of move back and forth between here and southern part of the country. And so we're examining some of those issues about how do you make sure things like, we never thought about the fact that ground floor access. Do we have a bathroom on the ground floor? Things that, in our house, we've got 2 boys, they can seem to find the stairs quite well and can run up and down them really fast, but that's not good for my father-in-law. So we're actually looking at, if he is going to move in with us, we're going to probably buy a new house. And we're going to make sure it's a house that he has a bedroom and a bathroom on that ground level. So I think we're just starting to dip our toes into the reality that the complications that we're facing. I think one of the things as Mayor of Brooklyn Park that I'll bring is we have a lot of people, West Africans, Liberians, who work in home health care. And so I have a good interaction with them, and I understand what they're going through, and they're trying to work and make a profession, and technology gets introduced into homes, healthcare, and that they aren't being trained for it, and they're just losing their jobs. So I think when we're talking about worker shortages, that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit. So I look forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Mark Uglum, and that's Norwegian too, as far as that goes. I'll give you a little background on myself. I am currently the representative in House District 36A, which encompasses the area north of here, from Hanson north, and from Highway 10 to the river in Coon Rapids, and also all of Champlin. I'm the former mayor of Champlin. I was fortunate enough to serve for 3 terms in the city of Champlin. Former chair of the Planning Commission, was also a member of the city council. And down at Brooklyn Park many years ago, I was a member of the Planning Commission down there when we did Edinburgh and all of that. I spent 35 years in private business, in paint and coatings manufacturing. Perhaps some of you know, for instance, Hirschfield's, the paint wallpaper retailers, and I started and owned with the president of Hirschfield's the manufacturing division. So we made paint, and it was a good living, and I was fortunate enough to sell out before the Great Recession, so things worked out pretty well there. So I am retired, and I certainly understand the issues. I have my Medicare card, and I have just recently gone through all the trials and tribulations of signing up for Medicare and so on and so forth. And I have many, many friends that are part of the Silver Tsunami. They are retiring. And we face some major challenges. There's no question about it. And we do need to change, and we'll be getting into that today. It's very important that we take care of our seniors, because many of us are going to be seniors in the future, and the baby boom generation and the greatest generation before us deserves that, deserves to be taken care of to the utmost of our ability. And elected officials, many of us, have got to come to grips and eliminate this gridlock and move forward with meaningful legislation that will improve the situation we have now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Kevin Parker. I'm the other candidate for 36A. So for the last 3 years, a lot of my work in advocacy has been centered around higher education on behalf of students and families. And so last year I was president of the Minnesota State College Student Association. That represents all of your community and technical college students from 48 campuses across the state. And over the course of that last 3.5 years, I had the opportunity to work with people from all varying age ranges. The actual average age in our community and technical colleges is 26. And that's including your 16-year-old PSEO students, and that's including people who are 40, 50 going back to get new skills so that they can hopefully get a better paying job and retire better than they would be able to or wouldn't be able to at this current moment. And so I've had a broad perspective, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running is, first I started dealing with people's education issues, what services are there, what isn't, what are the challenges, how do we overcome those? But the more you deal with thousands of people from all these different walks of life, you're prepping for many different things, whether it's to go out and get that career and have that hopeful middle-class existence or higher, or whether you're about to retire, whether you're saving for late in life. There's many things that can only be addressed at a legislative or state level. And so seeing all these different challenges, I can tell you right now that from the younger generation, I'm 26 myself, they're not planning for retirement for the most part. Right now, you're looking at, the 1st to the 5th of every month. That's where you're targeted. because that's when your bills are due. But there are some of us who are looking at it, there are some of us who are looking at our grandparents and going, well, how are we going to take care of them? What do we have in place? And the more you dig into the facts and then the cost, and John gave a great example there, it's hard. And so these are issues that are definitely of the utmost importance, because particularly from the crowd that I come from, in 40 years, we're the next ones. So how do we make sure that people right now are taken care of in an effective and efficient manner, and how do we, in a complete manner, and then how do we carry it forward for ourselves as we progress through and keep changing and adapting and taking care of these issues. And so that's why I'm here, and I look forward to this conversation as well.
Okay, now what we're going to do is, there was some background some of you did describe in question 1, but we've got 7 questions. And so what we're going to do is, I'll read each question. Senator John Hoffman will go first with question 1, and then we're going to, in fairness, go right on down the line and then start over. And again, if you have any questions for the candidates, Toby has the cards, and anything dealing with seniors, that would be great. And also with the last name of Pollock, my name has always gotten slammed, so I apologize to Mr. Lundy and Mark Uglum. Anyway.
It's a tough one, you know.
It is. Okay, question number 1. Now, some of you did this, but if you can expound a little more. Describe to us any personal experiences you have had with family, friends, or even yourself with receiving long-term care services, be it in a nursing home, assisted living community, adult daycare, or receiving services in-home.
Thank you. I'll just expand a little bit more what I started early. My mother-in-law recently had undergone hip surgery, and then in the process of getting the hip surgery healed, she went through some series of short-term therapeutic stays in St. Mary's. And then 2 years ago, she actually fell again, and it placed her in a long-term care situation. First started in the hospital, went into that hospital, went into the nursing home, developed a series of infections due to the fact that the hospital went back for readmittance. And those of us that understand Medicare reimbursement stuff, when they see a readmit, all of a sudden that gets a strike against the hospital, right? Everybody shakes their head that understands that. She went into that and then was placed into rehabilitative side of the nursing home. And we would go there. My wife would drive back and forth almost on a daily basis. And just to make sure that she was there with her mother as she went in through some really, really, really intense therapy. And Cliff, when you said it was the chamber over there, that's exactly what it was. But it got her up and moving, right? We got her up and moving. And the workers at that facility on a daily basis really, really cared about her. It's the same thing we see here. And I had mentioned when I was first elected, I spent some time here. I spent some time at other nursing care facilities, and knowing, especially right here in Coon Rapids, another one across the street, Mary T. Inc. is another large provider. And most of the time, and I'll talk about this later, some of the largest employers within small communities happen to be the assisted living facility or the nursing home facility or the short-term or long-term, and they're all kind of combined. But having that firsthand knowledge of seeing what my wife was going through back and forth, I came up with a bill. Granny Pods is what we called it, and it was a temporary home health care dwelling to help offset the costs of providing services, because the goal is not the long-term side of it, but it's to try to keep people in their homes. And I'll talk more about as we talk about elderly waiver services. But firsthand, seeing the love that's occurred in these facilities, that's why we need to support these facilities, both on the facility side of things, reimbursement side of things, and also the service payment side of things as well. And I know my time is up. Sorry, Toby.
So I touched upon what's going through our lives as we help. So both my parents and my father-in-law both have their retirement set. They're not entering into this phase, with a dependency on Social Security or any other aid. They've retired, saved up money. My dad, just for the providers, wants his last check to bounce, and that's been his plan all along. But we've seen the differences. My father-in-law did have an accident and had to drag himself up the stairs with a broken leg. And so that kind of opened our eyes to the idea of what can happen when you're not aware of some of these physical changes, and I think it kind of made us take a little longer look, and it was about when someone's recovering, where they go for recovery, where they are. I think the key term is quality of life. And so whatever we do, it can't be just to save money. It can't be just to do this. It's making sure that we provide people with quality of life and some dignity. And as mayor, it's been my privilege to work with healthcare providers who are building senior citizen complexes. And I got to introduce the term of aging in place. And the idea that people in a community want to age in their community. That there's nothing more than when my grandpa had the nearest place he could go to spend his last 6 months was 80 miles away from where he lived. He didn't see anybody. And so when you get to those kind of situations, you realize that if all of the cities don't have the facilities and abilities for people to, as they move through life, continue to be with friends and family. My family, my sons have been adopted by 4 senior citizens because they don't have anybody local. Their kids have moved away. And so because they like kids, and I'm not sure why they like my sons because they're kind of rambunctious, but they take part in those activities, and I think that's been that introduction of how we can do things. And as mayor, working with facilities to get things so that city services are provided to them, things like EMT. All of Brooklyn Park's fire department are EMT certified, which means they arrive at a facility like this ready to do certain things to help save someone's life if needed.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, like many people in my generation, both my parents have passed on. My mother passed on pretty quickly with some pretty aggressive cancer. But my dad, who I was very close with, lived with us for the last 4 years of his life. And I hope I can get through this because every time I think about it, it's tough. It's so important from a personal perspective, I think, to have family. And the wife and I, when my father was losing his eyesight through macular degeneration and getting a little senile, no longer could drive, the wife and I got together and we said, this is the best. So we moved him into our home. And very difficult, obviously, you know that. And watching him fail day by day, it was really tough. But we got through it, and then he had a stroke. So he had to go to a nursing home, and didn't last very long after that. So we had some very, very touching, personal, tough experience, but we did the right thing. I'm convinced of that, and when he died, I knew that. The thing that we have to do for all of our parents and relatives and things is very important. I think it's individual decisions, and we need to work towards that. But it's a big, big issue, and that's why we're here today. Thanks.
So I myself was a PCA, though I focused on mental health issues. I actually PCA'd for a girl who had autism. But being the age that I am, my great-grandmother passed several years ago, and she had services. My great-grandfather had died many years prior, and she lived to a good age, but it got to the point where she couldn't move around by herself. And so without the services that were provided, because she wanted to be part of her community. My grandmother and grandfather, they live in Georgia. They'd moved away from Oklahoma. All the kids had, and then my father was in the Air Force, my uncle was in the Army, so everyone was scattered across, and there really was no one in the area. We went and visited her when we could, usually a couple times a year. But she loved her community. She'd lived there her entire life. And then having to be separated from that, fortunately, she did have the services available that she could partake in the community. And she had a lot of visitors and a lot of people who would bring their kids over, friends would bring their grandkids over. And that was really, I've never seen someone smile so genuinely as when we were visiting and those people came by. And so it is of the utmost importance to keep them definitely in their community or with their family, and that is an individual choice. I think our struggle is making sure that choice is available. From this end, as we watch our great-grandparents go, as we watch our grandparents have to start making hard decisions. My grandparents in Georgia are starting to have to make those choices. My grandmother, one of the toughest women I know, she went through a stroke and a heart attack, and she's still walking. but we know we're counting down the days until that becomes more difficult. And so that choice is not always available because while they are fortunately in a place where there's a lot of care available, not everyone has that. And I have many friends who are going through those choices right now, and they're not really choices. And so how do we keep those options open? How do we make it possible for people to take care of their family, either in their community or in their home?
Thank you. Our next question. The senior care sector in Minnesota is facing severe staffing shortages to adequately cover the needs of Minnesota's growing senior population. According to the Long-Term Care Imperative's last legislative survey, there are at least 2,500 vacant positions in Minnesota nursing homes statewide. While the state legislature had made progress in improving wages and training opportunities for those working in this field in the last biennium, it is clear that more needs to be done, as it is projected that the demand for people in this field will only continue to grow. What policy ideas do you have to address this issue? And to start out this round, Mayor Lundy.
Thank you. I think this is, as I hinted in my first answer, one of the most important things is that we're offering adequate training. I know many West Africans who have lost their job because as you introduce technology, which is going to be the second part of my answer, people don't have that ability to use technology. If they don't have those skills, when technology is introduced into kind of environment, they tend to lose their position. And so I think we need to provide incentives. I think DEED really needs to step up to the plate, Department of Economic Development, and really say, we're going to start to provide this training because they're not right now. And so the whole generation, the next workforce is going to be more diverse than the people who are aging. And I think that's something that we're going to have to come to grips to as well, and that we need to help try to fund those gaps. I also think that introducing technology, I come from a field of working for Microsoft and Dell, and I know that if I can introduce technology to make people's jobs then more efficient, that can help multiply. So a person who might be able to take care of 4 people might be able to do 6. And those kind of things can help drive productivity gains. Because right now, the odds of us being able to fill all these open positions are, frankly, I think people are going to always have these openings. So we really should be looking at what else can we offer, what other incentives can we put in there to get people trained, ability to use it, and maybe allow some of those changes. We're going to talk in a later question about allowing technology to be used. I think the employment shortage is more acute in the metro, but outstate they don't have the facilities. So people who may want to do this work may have to drive an hour, hour and a half just to get to a facility that offers where they can actually employ. So you have that kind of the distance from people who would make up an employment pool. There is no easy answer. I think it's a tough job. I think the last one I would say is I've heard a lot of seniors say if there's a way to rework how they retire, those people who are able-bodied would love to take a shot at spending 3 or 4 years being a caregiver to fellow senior citizens, but they're worried about the effects on their pensions or their retirement.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, I really believe that there's 2 situations here that need to be remedied long-term, and that is we need to improve the quality of the help that we have. There are many, many good caregivers that do a wonderful job, but there's always, it doesn't matter what industry it is, to increase the quality of care is very important. And we do that through training. We do that through some government intervention, some programs for all the caregivers, and to get them trained up where they can be, again, more efficient and better at their jobs. Secondly, obviously, we need to increase the wages that many of these fine caregivers are paid. I did vote for the 5% bill. Many of you may not know about that, but the state reimburses, obviously, many, many caregivers. And last time around, in a bipartisan manner, we were able to increase those wages 5%. That was very big money when you consider all the way across the state, all the caregivers involved. But I think that was very important, and I will go on record as saying that I would support another bill for that as another 5% here in the future. I think it would be money that would be well invested.
Agreed, and that was a fantastic bill. Having been a PCA myself. So, coming, again, there's a different perspective. When it comes to a shortage of workers, what is the incentive to work? You have to love what you do as a key part of it. You always find that in any study, you love what you do, that greatly helps. Usually trumps even monetary. But more and more we have to look at what is the cost of, the key cost is training, and then what is the investment of the worker? Again, coming from a higher education perspective, we look at our technical colleges, which are more expensive but have a more immediate return. Someone is almost guaranteed to go out into the field and make anywhere between $15 and $25 an hour starting, depending on what the field is, sometimes more, especially if you're going into robotics, let's say. When it comes to healthcare, there are not always the same incentives in place. And so more and more people coming from my age group, my generation, are looking at how will I be able to take care of, my long term, how will I take care of my family, how will I take care of my grandparents, how will I take care of my parents, with what we're making in a field. Particularly when a lot of training and advanced training nowadays, you're going to have debt. The average debt for a bachelor's degree, let's say, is you're looking at $30,000 plus. So how do we address the issues that prevent people from getting into the care field, especially when they're passionate about it, especially when they do care, but when they have to look at their own life at 20, 30, 40 and go, I want to help take care of people, this is my passion, but what is in the area and how am I going to struggle and endure and make sure that I'm getting paid properly so that I can have a family, so I can take care of my parents and take care of my kids and set up a positive cycle when right now at the bottom level the cards are somewhat stacked against. And so I think the key thing is targeting those issues that prevent people from getting into the workforce in this particular field in the first place.
We took significant efforts in the last 4 years regarding both the how to address the staffing shortages and adequate coverage, and I want to break it down. There are two things that are really driving the factors that are attributing to the shortage. Number one is the opportunity, and number two are the wages. And one of the things that we as an industry can do, well, we as an industry, but we as policymakers can do for the industry is to, on the training and education, it's not just one entity within state government, because in 1999, remember the Olmstead decision said, right, services and supports must be collaborative, and that was saying that everybody has an obligation to provide people with disabilities and elderly, vulnerable within the community, the right to live, the right to work, etc. And so when you look at that, the provisions of Minnesota, it needs to be multiple agencies having this conversation. Then number one, talking to higher ed about tuition reimbursement. We did that with the teacher shortage. We can do that with the healthcare shortage. Scholarships need to be available through the Department of Human Services, as well as loan forgiveness. When you look at Title V public health dollars that come into the area of public health nursing or nursing, that all funnels its way into our assisted living and our long-term care facilities. And so loan forgiveness needs to be tools that we as a legislature can do to incentivize this industry. That's the first thing. And then secondly, the trend of the last 4 years was we did increase payment rates to nursing home facilities. And if nursing homes are paid the actual cost, here it is, the actual cost of the care they provide, then and only then will you be able to pay those competitive wages. We hear that day in and day out, nursing services going someplace else because of the fact there isn't a competitive wage market in this place. And that will also help this industry with reducing turnover and attracting new employees to the industry, which we did see happen after the bill that I co-authored and the bills that I was part of, was to see the more money come in and to see that happen.
Thank you. Our next question. In your opinion, what policy changes should be explored to help seniors and their families finance their potential long-term care needs? And just as a reminder, there's 60,000 individuals turning 65 each year in Minnesota between now and the year 2030. Representative Uglum, you get to go first.
Thanks, Tom. That would be my generation. That would be my friends.
Me and Jerry.
Me and Jerry, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, what can we do to help seniors for their retirement and everything else? One thing that we tried to do this last session was, how many of you know that Minnesota is one of the few states that taxes your Social Security income? We're one of only, I believe, 6 states that taxes your Social Security income. Funny how other states don't have to rely on that, but we seem to have to. How would you like to be able to put a little extra money in your pocket if we could rescind that tax provision? Unfortunately, the tax bill was vetoed this time around, but it would be big money. It would be, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million on the budget in the state of Minnesota, but we do have about $1 billion surplus, and I can think of no better place to put it, to spend that surplus, than to help seniors in their Social Security payments or recipients. I think the other thing that is pretty important is I would like to see us provide some tax breaks for families that take care of their elderly parents. There's a significant cost to that. And obviously we know that having to be in a nursing home costs a lot of money too. But if we could provide some tax breaks to younger generation that are helping their parents at their own homes and taking care of them, I think that would be a wonderful idea. So we need to drive some monies and tax breaks to the people that need it the most. And seniors need it the most. Obviously, we are living on fixed incomes, myself included. And you're relying on your investments, which sometimes is very difficult. Or maybe you're relying on the sale of your home and things like that. Perhaps we make some more exceptions for capital gains in the sale of homes. You have some now, but maybe we expand that. There's lots of things that we can do to make seniors have a little more money in their pockets, and I think that's very important. So tax breaks, get rid of the tax on Social Security are 2 of my main objects that I would like to see passed in this next legislative session.
So when we're talking about that, for the immediate tax breaks are good for the immediate and concurrent years, but we're going to continue about long-term funding, about the future, again, from this perspective. Right now, if you talk to anyone, you go to an Oka Ramsey and you say, hey, what are your plans for when you retire? You're a deer in the headlights. I mean, look at the bills that we have nowadays. We have, if you have a home, you have that. Otherwise, you have rent, which is about the same cost. Then you're looking at your phone bill, you're looking at gas, you're looking at your registration of your car, then you're looking at your regular insurance. So somewhere along the way, when you're doing your savings, your immediate planning starts with hopefully a house one day, hopefully a better car than what you're driving at the moment. And so we look at things like the health savings accounts, like our HSAs. I think that should be expanded as something that you can put away that money for your long-term care. And it should be incentivized, so that there's more reason and purpose to it, so that families are looking at it as a real option. I think it's a cultural change there, that the tax breaks are good, and I agree with Representative Uglum on that, looking for the immediate and making sure that that money's coming back to you so you can't afford it. But we also have to look at the long term of why has this risen to become such an issue at this moment? What are we doing on the front end to incentivize and prepare people as we move on through life? Because it's really easy to get caught up when you have families of 3, 4, 5, extended families, everything going on, your jobs. We're more 2-parent households working now than we've ever had, to get caught up in everything and all the busy work, essentially, and all the paperwork. But how do we address this as something that needs to be a part of everyone's structured life as we prepare to go through the next 40 years of our life?
Many
many Minnesotans don't have a plan for long-term care. We know that, and what we've seen is there's a reliance on medical assistance to be the provider of payment. And I'm going to give a differentiation between Medicare and Medicaid, medical assistance and Medicare, because a lot of people get those two confused. But reliance on the medical assistance side drains the state resources, and that eliminates much of the income and assets for an individual and does not adequately reimburse nursing homes. We get back to that argument I said earlier about paying for the actual cost and the reimbursement side, which we'll even talk about even more when we talk about elderly waiver services. But there's more we can do to encourage the individuals to plan ahead. There hasn't been enough of that, and there isn't, and we need to do that because especially with the silver tsunami with us, and we know what's going to be happening, that all three entities are going to create a win in the long run if we can get that to match up. Now, the education and awareness that is there will help individuals be aware that Medicare, as we know, does not pay for long-term care like many people mistakenly believe, right? We know that. And so providing resources to help individuals make decisions about the long-term care early in their lives will only help Minnesotans, especially when it comes to financing options. And absolutely, all discussions are on the table. And last year when we absolutely took care of the veterans paying taxes on their pension and their benefits, that was a $26 million fix. We did that in the budget. That was bipartisan. The same thing here. When we start to look at the Social Security aspect of that side and saying, well, how can we create a system that's flexible so that actually goes to some of our long-term care costs? Especially when reliance on medical assistance really is going to take a system that's already struggling right now and just force more of us now increasing our tax burden on when it comes to the medical assistance. So let's really get the engagement out there and education and awareness on it. So that would be step number one and number two.
I think, first and foremost, the tax bill not passing is a good example of why, in St. Paul, we need people who can reach across party lines. Partisanship, it was the sole reason why it didn't pass. And that's why Social Security, kept making that tax, which kind of defeats the purpose. We're saying here before you saying that we want to make your life easier and make you able to pay for more services. And on the other hand, we're reaching into your pocketbook and taking money. And it makes no sense that I want to take money from you to give you money. I think the first thing we could do is say government is stop the taking, let people see how much they can actually purchase with their own purchasing power. Second, I'd like to revamp the tax code to allow people to pool for savings, not for myself, but for my parents. That if, like my father and his 6 brothers and sisters, they pooled all their money together to care for my grandmother, who outlived my grandpa by about 20 years. And so everything was done with that idea that they were going to make sure the house was fixed, they were going to make sure that the needs were taken care of, that they took care of everything she did, and all 7 of them contributed to that pooling, that money. I think it would be good if you're having a college plan that allows me to save money for my son's college needs in 6 to 8 years, that why not allow kids, who my age, so not kids anymore, put money away and we have some tax benefits so that they can help pay for some of those care costs. Because there's no incentive now. The incentive is not to do things. We want people to be incentivized to put money into these type of investments so that they can invest in their parents' quality of life as they age. And I think that would be a good first step toward doing that as well. I think that looking at home health care, I keep going back to aging in place and the ability to keep someone's quality of life so they can stay in the community they've spent their entire life with, the friends they know, that if something happens, if they're hurt, if they need needs, that we can get them in a place or deliver health care services to their home so that they still have that support network. And so there's a lot of data about people as they move into these different retirement homes. There's a lot of angst and a lot of unknowns. And I don't think that's where you want to spend as you age out.
I'm done.
Back to me. Our next question. Do you support reforms to the elderly waiver program so that community care options can become more accessible to low-income seniors throughout the state? And do you have specific ideas of what should be included in those reforms? Mr. Parker, you get to start.
Well, yes, short answer, yes. It's support of anything that allows people to have that community service and begin, how important it is to be a part of that community. Looking at specific policy, reading the background information that was provided, the key thing, any barrier that ever happens when a service isn't able, when a waiver isn't being able to be used by community service, let's say, usually there's some kind of restriction or requirement that's not being met. And so we do need to look at then what barriers are preventing community services from accepting the waiver so that it can be taken. And they seem like the other alternative that, again, the background information provided, is that they might have to go to a more costly nursing home that A, is probably not among their community, and B, more expensive. So how can we open up and take out the specific barriers, which I would need the experts to talk to me about. What are those barriers, identifying them, and then addressing them so that there are those options available and people aren't limited or restricted to something that's A, more expensive and just ends up weighing more heavily either on the individual, the family, or the state, and B, lets them stay in their home and not force them to relocate simply because the service provided and the funding for it aren't lining up for whatever reason.
I had over half a dozen bills specifically dealing with the elderly waiver when it comes to the MA spend down, when it comes to elderly waivered services expansion. And one of the things was that you have an asset. Elderly waivered program is an asset in both this community and the state of Minnesota because we know the longer individuals can be on receiving care in the community, that's going to be better for the individual in the state because then the long-term costs aren't there. We've made significant investments over the years, but it's been very clear that more needs to be done. I had a simple bill which would have said you can keep your medical insurance benefits, and for years historically, if you made $1 more, you had $1 more asset than 100% of poverty, you on an elderly waivered program had to spend down to 75%. That's still the same issue in the federal level. In the state, my bill actually got that to go to 80%, which put more money into the pockets of those folks that are on elderly waivered services, and also said that I'm not going to require you to be in as much poverty as you were prior to this bill being done. But the state needs to ensure, and let me go back to that, the same thing I did with that is, and I'm glad to hear Jeff talk about a college plan for kids. Well, I happen to be the one who brought the ABLE Act to the state of Minnesota. It was the first time that a federal law that was bipartisan in nature, which allowed families to put money into a trust, and it's there right now. The ABLE Act, you can look it up, allows families to put money into a trust to care for a child who might have a significant health care need for the long-term care that might be needed for the individual. Because in the past, if that child had more than $2,000 in assets, they lost everything. And in this case, this allows them to put that money into a trust which will take care of the long-term needs, which is really important. We were one of the first of 5 states in the nation to do that. I was proud to bring it to Minnesota. So thanks to the ABLE Act on that. But the state can do to ensure is the adequate funding, because what the Elderly Waiver Service Program does is it saves medical assistance dollars because it avoids that institutional care piece. And those types of services need to reflect, I think, with some flexibility, the advances in technology and knowledge that we have and the best way to serve the community. I absolutely love digging deep in the Elderly Waivered Services programs, and I could spend the next hour talking about what can we do differently about it right now, but thank you.
I think to answer the first question is I absolutely do support making that more accessible. I think one of the key parts is that you're being able to find a facility that accepts it. And I think that's one of the key parts, especially in rural Minnesota where there are farther distances between facilities. And so people are at the burden of, let's say the nearest facility is 60 miles away and now I have to move, which defeats the whole purpose of trying to set up a caring environment. So as that person ages, they're with friends, they're with family, they're with people who are going to spend time with them. Many studies have shown that when people's emotional health is good, their physical health follows. So if they're seeing friends and family and they're seeing grandchildren and great-grandchildren, that does have an effect on a person's physical well-being as well. I think that one of the things we could do is work with cities and counties to start to look at how can we design programs to incentivize people to invest in more care facilities. That if there are more facilities out there, people would have these options. If someone said, I'm going to take advantage of this incentive program to build a new facility, then we would require them to accept so many people from this program. And so therefore, we're kind of in a way like affordable housing, where you may require people to meet a certain income need. You're able to help drive that as well. I think the last thing is just, when I was door knocking this summer, and I'm still door knocking now, is I've met so many people who tell me the same story, which is reforms trigger other problems, where increasing this benefit gets people kicked off the federal program, or increasing this gets people kicked off here. The wage increase for the adult who's disabled, working at home, living at home with his elderly parents, caused him to lose his health care. And so I look at those things and say, if we've got smart people and they're looking at this, we should be able to figure out that if we're going to do reforms, for God's sakes, make sure they don't trigger other problems. And we've been doing that.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll be relatively brief on this. I do support reforms to the elderly waiver programs. Obviously, the spend down provision is terrible, needs to be changed. And that's really erroneous on a lot of families. These programs keep costs down, obviously, and drive efficiencies. I think that's really, really good, and we can make the programs that much better. Jeff said it best: aging in place, aging in your community, aging in your neighborhood, aging with your loved ones at home, and everything else, I think, should be encouraged, and anything government can do to encourage that, I think, is really good. And the other thing about this is we need to reduce the red tape that is involved with these waiver programs. I mean, I'm sure probably none of us in this entire room could probably fill some of the paperwork out as complicated as it is, and we need to eliminate that red tape.
Thank you. Our next question: in order to meet the needs of Minnesota's aging population, Minnesota's nursing facilities will need to be remodeled, renovated, and sometimes replaced altogether. Do you support efforts to reform how Minnesota pays nursing facilities to renovate or replace their buildings? Senator Hoffman, you get to go first this time.
Thank you. That is an important question, because we saw how having an inflexible system, especially previous 10 years, was causing lots of angst in smaller towns, and we actually saw some facilities close because of that. We've created, I think, especially with nursing homes, and necessary to ensure some long-term care, we had to create, in which we did and we need to continue on, there's got to be this latitude in the payment rate structure, the tax incentives. There's some moratorium issues there that are there, and the moratorium exceptions too. We need to expand on those, and then there's some other financing mechanisms that people seem to be categorically placed, and when you need to see, like the combinement, you always hear about an encumbered, we're going to give you this, but you have to encumber so much of that to go toward that. Well, if we're not giving latitude and flexibility in the provider of the service to take some of that money that's there, that's tied to or encumbered to something, to be able to utilize according to their unique needs in their facility, then I think you're missing the boat. There needs to be some more flexibility in that as well. And that really gets to saying, are we willing to have the conversation to look at all other options to be explored within that, and not just the payment rate structure, but making that a flexibility so that people can provide it without losing the care and benefits that are there. A lot of times when CMS, Centers for Medicaid Services, are telling you how to do your services, you have to be really specific to the T, correct? And if you're not specific to the T, then oops, you're not going to get the ICD-9 or ICD-10 code or whatever we're at right now to pay for whatever billing services are there. So giving the latitude and flexibility on the state level when it comes to the medical assistance reimbursement side of things, I think is a good start. We started that, and now we just need to expand on that. And that way, we also have to say, because a lot of times the bureaucracy is, well, reforms, they get put on sideline because there's a conversation of, we've never done it like that before. And what really needs to be done is some innovation in that place. And I think with giving us that we did the flexibility and latitude, and we continue that, then we can set aside that attitude that, well, we're not going to look at this because that should be sidelined. No, 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 no. I think there's smarter conversations to be yet in that field.
I think, there's a few different things. One is, I think we have to face the reality that if you want people to invest money into renovation, you're asking people to invest capital. And Minnesota is one of the highest tax states in the country. That has an effect on where people invest their money. What we want to do is create an environment where people want to pool their money together and start to invest in it. If people have worked with affordable housing and all, you understand that there are certain people who pool their money and they do work in that. And they have a partnership with cities, counties, to help make sure that affordable housing is done. I think we need to have the same type of innovative thinking to apply that to facilities, whether it's renovation, because we want them to be renovated. A city without proper care for their seniors is not a city that's going to last long. There is no long-term story for a city that doesn't have the ability for residents to age in that community. And so it's in the vital interest. And as mayor, I've worked with multiple sites as we've provided new services. We've provided services that were targeted for elderly who were low income, people that wanted to age so that as they were fully capable, they would age out and they would be with their friends as they passed through. I think that if we don't address the fact that this state is a very high-tax state, you will see capital leave the state to go invest in other states where they're willing to provide these incentives. I would like to see investment pools where we allow people to pool money with cities to help fund these. We do it all the time with affordable housing. I think there's no reason we can't apply the same model to renovations or any other business venture. I can think of maybe one time in my 6 years as mayor where we've had a facility that says we want to renovate, we'd like to partner with the city to do that. Businesses, we do it all the time, but we never have those conversations because there's not the incentives to get it done.
There he is, the old mayor talking, me too, as a former mayor of Champlin. I think housing choice and housing variety is very, very important. In Champlin right now, we are building 2 senior facilities. One is a senior housing co-op, and the other is a affordable senior high-rise market rate, but with an affordability function in there too, with some care facilities. So cities have to really open up and recognize the fact that these are good quality projects for the city. And Jeff said it best: if cities, whether it be Coon Rapids or Champlin or Anoka, don't take care of their senior citizens, they're not doing a good job representing you. Now there's many, many things that we can do to make it much more affordable for a facility like this to be built today. Cities use what they call TIF, or tax increment financing, to attract new business to the city. Now that works in many cases in the private sector. It could also work for nursing home or senior care facilities and things like that. Low interest loans for the investors. Somebody's got to build this place, right? There's got to be capital. There's got to be someone with a checkbook. There's a contractor, and they're building it. But low interest loans are also something that cities can offer. I know Brooklyn Park and Champlin do, and we need to encourage more of that for senior type facilities. And zoning laws with cities. Senior facilities can fit right into a residential neighborhood just like this. But in many cities, they do not allow it. We need to change that. So a senior facility, you have flexibility on where you can put this in the city. So there's lots of things that cities can do, and at the state level, we can encourage it too. But we can use the models that we're using right now with tax increment financing, low interest loans, and very good zoning laws to make it a lot easier. Thank you.
You ready?
I'll listen to my colleagues. There's a lot of great, fantastic ideas there. A lot of it seems based within the city, working with the state. My only concern is, as we look forward and we look at the massive amount of people entering the retirement age and entering the situation where you start having to make these decisions, is whether the cities will respond fast enough. Some places do it better than others. It seems like Champlin and Brooklyn Park are doing amazing. Others don't, as we know. And so if we're talking about trying to ensure and make sure that people have the opportunity and ability to stay in their community, we have to look at, I like the idea of looking into the city and the investments and low interest loans, way to draw it, but at the same time we need to make sure that from the state side, we're going to provide enough assistance or change how we fund it more appropriately so that we have facilities that are usable, that are updated. When you're working in higher education, you have building issues as well, as buildings don't serve the purpose, they don't meet the needs of the community, they don't meet the needs of instruction. And so we always go about HEAPR, higher education, asset preservation and restoration. Because if a building is leaking or falling apart, you can't put students in there, it turns out. So if you're having that issue, if you're finding a facility doesn't meet people's needs, then I would hope that, yes, we look at long-term and efficient and drawing in those investments and those low-interest loans, but at the same time that we are prepared as a state to fund those things when necessary so people don't have to get upheaved and moved to other places where the city just happens to do it better than your home community.
Thank you. Our next question, with advances in telemedicine, seniors are able to connect with their caregivers and healthcare providers without leaving their home. However, public policy does not necessarily keep up in this area. As a matter of fact, many of these services are not reimbursed by public programs. How would you support updates to the policies to create better access to telehealth options? And Mayor Lundy, you get to go first.
Thank you. I think this is one area I definitely will bring to legislature a different viewpoint. I've spent over 20 years working for technology companies, including Dell and Microsoft. I worked in Japan on medicine, on equipment that's used and how people view their medical records, view x-rays, view PAC. And so the ability of technology to help solve some of these needs, especially in rural areas where they don't have access to the same facilities, where a nearby facility means a day-long trip. When I was young, which was centuries ago, it feels like, I had to go all the way from northern North Dakota down to Rochester, Minnesota to have that because the only doctor that was close enough to look at something that I had was there. So a 12-hour visit just to get to the doctors. And so many of our rural areas there have doctor shortages and facility shortages. Having technology bridge that gap, allowing people to access records, it's only being held up by the fact that people haven't passed the laws necessary to free that up. It is not mind-bending, it's not something abnormal to be able to look at your records. If anybody in this room has a smartphone, you're able to look at your banking record, you're looking at something that 20 years ago would have been unheard of, to actually access your banking information on your phone. The same type of rules in HIPAA that govern those type of interactions are applied to technology. When you go to your doctor's office and they pull up your record on the computer, the records aren't there. They're accessing that data remotely. This should be something that we can do. It would help immensely with the shortages of acute care, doctor care in rural areas where they don't have access to facilities like this or hospitals nearby that would allow this to take place.
Jeff, could I get that on my flip phone too? Maybe not.
Mine.
No, just a small joke there. This is some of the most exciting frontiers, if you will, with the telecommunications and electronic communications that can happen in healthcare. It's going to drive costs down. I think it's fantastic. My little joke about the flip phone, I do have a smartphone, but I'm not exactly the world's most technological guy. So I will accede to the rest of the group here who really knows more about it. But I can tell you this, I'm very, very enthused about it. And I know that electronic record keeping, my daughter actually used to work for United Healthcare, and they have saved millions of dollars with some of their technological innovations in terms of electronic record keeping and so on and so forth. I think it's the future. We need to do everything we can to encourage it.
Agreed, particularly coming from a generation that's overflowed with technology. We always, one of our first go-tos is, what can we build to address the situation? Going back to a key part of the question is, specifically, how would you, with public policy, support updates to create better access to those options? Because currently, apparently many of them aren't being reimbursed. And the simple answer is change that formula, change that policy so that it is. If it saves money and makes it more affordable, it's one of those situations where someone can get caught, I suppose. You want to take advantage of this particular technological advantage that helps cut cost, but if it's not being reimbursed and someone's paying for it, whether it's on the healthcare provider side or it's on the patient side. So it's one of those, if I work too many hours or I make too much money, then I barely get off the assistance that's keeping me where I am, so on and so forth. So making sure that if this is efficient, if this is amazing, if it's saving millions of dollars, it is the new frontier, then make sure that we're treating it as such and acknowledging it and incentivizing it as such by addressing those particular barriers, those things that aren't being addressed, the fact that it's not being reimbursed, and ensure that it is being reimbursed so that there's incentive to continue building on this and not a requirement for someone to come into an office and increase those costs.
Having spent a good number of years on the federal level talking about the services and supports to children and families, the issue of the Health Insurance Portability Act has come up, and that it all centers around data privacy. Everybody's touched on that a little bit. One of the things that really needs to be talked about on the federal level and then trickle down on the state level is the reimbursement and utilization. There's still not just the Centers for Medicaid Services talking about the reimbursement having to be face-to-face, but there's also some of your rules within your formularies of your HMOs that are saying, well, you got to see the doc in order to get the reimbursement side. There's still some inconsistency there. And so seeing true reform on that, number one, it has to be addressed in the state Medicaid plan. I think we need to start addressing that. And that's a bureaucracy of making that part of the state's Medicaid reimbursement plan. But then the utilization on that aspect of it too. Getting Centers for Medicaid Services and getting the HMOs to all come together to agree that, yes, when I'm sitting there in front of the teleprompter and it's Dr. Johnny from Mayo who's addressing some widget that I need, that's actually important. And I saw that. It's working in one industry, especially in mental health. Within our state's correction system, they have the ability to pull up a psychologist via telemedicine who's able to sit and have a conversation with somebody who might be going through some co-occurring concerns. Well, that's not a Medicaid reimbursable thing. That's something that we're paying for out of the state. But the fact is, I've seen it firsthand work. Also saw it firsthand in Iowa when they set up the Iowa Access System. It was the ability to do that telemedicine, and you saw that in early intervention services as well. But why it was reimbursable under early intervention services is because the coordinated, comprehensive, and collaborative account said that the Department of Education, and in the case of Medicaid and CMS, they are the payer of last resort. You found other avenues to pay for that to begin with. That takes a selective conversation, but truly we can do that. Number one, the reimbursement side, make it part of our plan, and number two, the utilization side, to make sure that everybody is in that should be in there having that conversation.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that if you have a question that you want to ask the candidates, Toby has the cards. You can raise your hand, you can bring one over, and you can fill it out. So please feel free to do that. Because we have our last question. Pardon me? Okay. In your view, how do lawmakers strike a balance in using technology such as electronic monitoring to protect vulnerable adults while ensuring that their privacy is protected? Representative Uglum, you get to go first.
Well, thank you. And this is a very difficult question, I think. And a lot of times it depends on the facility, too. I mean, in a facility like this, I'm sure that there probably are no problems, and many facilities are like this. But there are some problems in some facilities, and we just really don't know what's going on. We need to protect our seniors. We're vulnerable. And in certain cases, it's an issue. Many of you maybe read or heard about a recent court decision that is going to allow seniors in facilities to make it a lot easier for them to sue for redress in a situation where they are abused. And I think that's a very, very good court decision. And it just came down just recently. we have individual rights that we have to look at here because the caregivers themselves obviously have some rights too. But looking at monitoring where it's appropriate in an area or facility that has a history of some elder abuse, I think should be looked at very carefully. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen. To me, it's one of the worst crimes that there is. And I certainly can't condone it, and I certainly hope that in many cases we can find this answer, and I think it depends a little bit on the facility.
Agreed. It's a travesty. If my grandparents end up in a home and something happens to them, we come from a military family. But when we're talking about the question itself, how do we address using this technology to record and protect and prevent these situations so it never has to get to us too, and people are protected on the front end. You never have to go to that courtroom while respecting the privacy, I think, as lawmakers. And some of these things can be covered in like the Data Practices Act. But when we first, the concern that was given in the background information was people don't know they're being recorded, particularly the customer here. So in that situation, I think that it should be a policy that people are aware of when they're being recorded or what's being recorded, should have some say in that bit of their safety. And as long as they're aware of it and we don't force them to be recorded 24/7, then the balance is let people know when they're being recorded and where they're being recorded. Let them have an option of, like, we can record, make sure you're protected in these various areas if you don't feel comfortable with it. But then know the balance is that when you're recorded, we can ensure that you will be protected, that we can respond and react. If abuse is happening, then we can come in and end it or prevent it or do the necessary action afterwards to deal with any individuals who would begin or try to carry out that abuse. Because that's what the question was targeting there, was that balance. How do we protect your privacy while at the same time ensuring that you're not being abused with this particular tool and method? And that would be it, is people know they can have that conversation to discuss where they feel safe with it happening. And then also, on the legislative side, having any of those recordings protected. They're purely to be used to ensure that you're not being abused. They're purely there to protect you, and in no way should they ever leave that facility, short of a court case perhaps, involving someone who's done that abuse.
If we look at it from the standpoint of what's my outcome, what's my intended purpose of having an electronic monitor on, and I think back 4 years ago, there was a group of bipartisan legislators that went to the competition and saw what they were doing to enhance, because they're talking about wanting to give people as much independence in the community as possible. They had set up an apartment that was amazing. I mean, there was over-the-counter monitoring devices that, you know, if somebody had wet the bed, they knew immediately, and so somebody could come in and change that versus getting on that routine of every 2 hours, you know, you check that. So there was a decrease in you know, the ability on bed sores. But the other thing that was important about that is it would notify when your meds needed to be taken, and this machine would pop up, and it was just really, it tried to make it as independent as possible. And it was to me, it was an eye-opening experience, because the purpose of that setting up that apartment was to culture some great independence for an individual and then give peace of mind to the son. In this case, he lived in California, and he was able to have a conversation with his mother via this new thing called an iPad. And it was it was an iPad 1, I believe, what was sitting on the table. But it was just amazing to see that whole paradigm, because it became about engagement and security and safety for the individual, and assurance. The paradigm wasn't about, oh, do I gotcha on the case of it, but rather it was used in the aspect of how can I gain more independence for an individual. That's some good stuff. We wrote a bill to increase that and to get some funding for that, and it made its way through, and then it just kind of got set aside, because the issue that did come up was the whole thing about data privacy, and now you're going to infringe on my my parents' rights, or you're going to infringe on my rights. And a lot of people, there's still that conversation that needs to happen. But I think if we go in it from an aspect of saying, how can I make this as most independent as possible, and allow to know that my mom or my grandma or my dad or my loved one is safe, then I think we got a win-win here. It's amazing what they were doing, and I've seen it here too. I'm going to give one example, and then I'll be done. Medicine, for example, you have in this building the ability to get a medicine that's so controlled by an electronic way to do it that you don't have to worry about a 24-hour pharmacist like you would, you know, like, oh my goodness, I need a Zarfanan or whatever the word is that you're looking for a pill. And it's like, I don't have it, but the script can be sent electronically, and here's this machine that you guys have in this building that has got cameras looking around it, and it'll go, yep, you can get it, and poof, it pops off that Zarfanan or whatever it is that you need, and guess what? You don't have to wait 24 hours to get some doctor's signature and stand in line to get it. You can get it right here. I think that's still here, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely it is. That's amazing technology. So technology can work good for us.
I think first and foremost, I'd increase the penalties on people who abuse and take advantage of elderly. If you want to make a penalty tougher, let's make the crime harsher. And I think you're going to say people who take a second thought about whether they're going to engage in this type of behavior. And that would make the crime hopefully not happen. But if it does happen, I think that's one of the worst things you can do is take advantage of a vulnerable adult or a retired person. I'd have no problem making that crime much tougher. And having the penalty be much higher. Second thing is, I don't want to create a condition where you are a prisoner in your own room. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you're talking about electronic monitoring, they do that for criminals. And so what I don't want to create is a condition where people feel like it. Because what could happen, and this is how government works, is we won't force you to have to wear it, but we'll force the providers. Or the insurance companies are going to say, we will cut your rates, or we're going to increase them, unless you introduce this into your room. So then what happens is the people who are having you as their guest are going to have that monitoring there because they have to. And if you object, you may have to leave. So now you're forced to take part in monitoring that maybe you did not want, or maybe you believe, because your rights do not end the moment you check into a facility, that you should have the rights to know what is happening at all times, have it fully transparent to anybody, and also have the option to say no. Because we all know what happens when government or insurance companies start to say, thou shalt have. Pretty soon you have no options because the only way you can get insurance is to do something. And so it's a delicate balance. I think that where we have investigations, there are things called court orders. I think where there is abuse, if there are people who engage upon it, I think background checks can start to look for some of these things so that people who are entering a field that may have some questionable activities. I do think that as long as everybody knows what's happening, and the person involved has assented, not because they're forced to, not because of the threat of leaving, but because they believe that they're going to be protected, then I would support that.
So Toby, were there any questions?
No questions, we can go to closing statements.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank all four of you for being here today, and we'll start with the closing remarks.
Thank you for letting me come back here and to see you again and to have this conversation. 1 hour doesn't give us justice when we're talking about the complexities of health and human services. When you're talking about health and human services, it's birth all the way through our waning years, and we need to be assured that the right people are representing you that understand the complexities of that. And that's one thing that I have shown, that I have understood multiple times, is how the complexity of health and human services and serving on those committees and making sure that the bills that I've gotten to become law only benefit the community that we serve and that I serve, and especially you. Our greatest generation, we said to you we would take care of you. And this is one way that we're doing it. Now let's make sure we're absolutely doing it. You hear the good things that this facility has provided from the stories from John and from Cliff, both the short-term and long-term, and the fact that we know that your wife is being taken care of here, Cliff, and you're the first to stand up here and tell everybody about it. Tom, that's an amazing thing that to be able to have, is the public believes in what you're doing here. I believe in what you're doing here, and I will stand committed and support everything that you are doing here, because Your generation, our greatest generation, deserves that from my generation, because pretty soon I will become your generation that you're sitting at, like Mark Uglum and Kevin have had the conversation on, and we all sat up here and made that. But thank you for letting me be here and being with you. I enjoy coming here, and I love the work that's going on here.
Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone as well on this nice day that you're taking time. So I'll be more brief because I think that you should all get outside and enjoy what left of the good weather, because winter does come once again. I want to thank you for the questions. I don't think anybody up here has any illusions that somehow we're going to solve the crisis, but I think there are certain things that we can do, things like removing the tax on Social Security, things about getting stuff done, and really taking a good look and making sure that we don't have those unintended consequences, that we reform something else, that we cause another problem. I think that we need to be partners with the communities. As mayor, I work very closely with our senior care facilities to make sure they're there, because we need them. We need to have conversations about how the changing demographics are going to affect us and how can we plan for the future. And so I just want to again thank you for the time. And I look forward, if I'm given the opportunity to represent you, that I will be back as well to listen to your concerns.
Again, thank you for taking the time, and it's really been a pleasure to be here. I think we are facing many, many challenges in health and human services as demographically we age. And this is going to be one of the greatest challenges for any legislative body, any governmental body here in the future. Whether we talk about Social Security going bankrupt, whether we talk about increased taxes and things on Social Security, these are items that are facing us and the decision makers here, not only at the local level and the state level, but at the federal level. And we are not doing a very good job. I'm sorry to say, Minnesota Health and Human Services could do a lot better. Part of that is our job to make sure that they do. And rest assured, I think all of us up here feel the same way. We need to really place this as one of our highest priorities we have at the state level. And you need to talk to your federal congressmen and federal senators, because so much of this is federal. Obviously, we have the MNsure debacle that's gone on, and it's been a massive failure for many, many people here in the state. We have to fix that. Healthcare premiums going up as much as 67% this year. Nobody can afford that. It's just a crying shame that some of the things that have been passed have failed so badly. So we have our challenges ahead of us. I think that we're up to the task. It's going to take some time, and it just basically has to be priority number one. Thank you.
I think I would agree. I think that everyone up here feels the same, but this is something that's important because it's affected all of our lives in one way or another. It affects the people that we live with, that we go out and work with. And it's a challenge. It's difficult to talk about at times because I'm going through a phase where the last 6 years I was a pallbearer at my grandfather's funeral. And it shows just how much, and he's fortunate that he had a very, very loving wife that as he was going through Alzheimer's, even becoming aggressive, that she kept taking the steps to take care of him. But not everyone has that. I've had a lot of friends who either struggle as they try to take care of their parents and had them move in, or try to pay for the proper care to take care of them. And so this is, believe me, this isn't an exclusive issue. This is, I think John put it best, health and human services in general covers from birth through death, everything in between. Families are interconnected, communities are interconnected. And so thank you for having us here. And if you ever have any questions, I've got cards on me. My cell phone number is a pretty public thing. I look forward to conversations with people. Catch me before I have to leave here. And know that this is a number one up there with education, with taking care of our children, all of our most vulnerable. This is up there in the top priorities.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you again, and just want to remind everybody in the audience that we did leave some space aside for their brochures, some of their information, that if you want to take that on your way out, please feel free. And again, thank you for being here, and you too. So
Thank you, Tom.
a round of applause. Thank you.